since it's 3 o'clock, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining the Artist Guide to Navigating the COVID-19 World webinar. My name is Chapin, and I assist with contracts, operations, and information technology at the IAC, and I'll be helping with tech for the video call this afternoon. So a few quick things. We have another packed schedule and over 100 of you on the call between Zoom and on Facebook Live. So to keep things moving smoothly, we do ask that you type any questions into the chat box, and out of respect to our speakers, remain on mute. And we will try to get to those as often as we can, but we'll likely hold till the end. Also, just a heads up, we're aware that we're having slight audio issues. So if you have a little bit of feedback, we apologize, and we're working on rectifying that. So as we have in our previous webinars, before I welcome our Artist and Community Services Manager to officially open the meeting, I invite you to please share what you, as an individual artist, are doing to uplift your community. We've seen a lot of you engaging your audiences in different ways and invite you to share that with your peers in the chat box now. Thanks in advance for your responses, and now please welcome Anna Tragesser.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here together. Today, we're going to talk about the new normal, and we're going to get a high-level view of the types of government support coming down the pipeline, and we're going to do a little bit of a financial check-in. Today's webinar should feel a little bit like a periscope, right? That little viewer that comes out of the submarine. While you may be feeling underwater, we are doing our best to look above the surface and help you prioritize what to pay attention to and where to go next. So put these things on your calendar. Every Monday, 3 to 4 p.m., Elaine, Grogan, Latrobe of Minerva Financial Arts hosts a Coping with COVID financial support group. It's been an incredible resource to me individually and to a lot of artists I work with. Most Wednesdays at 3 p.m., we host a deep dive webinar on specific topics. Next week, we are hosting one on intellectual property rights and copyright law 101, but it will be at 4 o'clock on Wednesday, April 8th. And you can find that information on our website, which let me show you right now exactly where you can find it. If you will go to our homepage, find this square that says webinars and training at the bottom. And from here, you can find all of our upcoming webinars, register for them, and find resources that we're referencing. So today, everything that we're going to reference is already linked on our homepage, on this page. And so you can tell that there's quite a bit of information that you're probably going to want to dig into in more depth coming up. The other thing you should know is that on our homepage, we want to keep hearing about what's going on with you. We have an open line survey for you. And what we mean by open line is that you should continue to submit that survey even as things change for you. So you maybe submit the survey and tell us what's going on, what you need, what's coming down the pipe for you. That helps us create some of these tools. But then as circumstances change, go ahead and submit it again. We're going to be looking at it in real time so that we can help you and provide the right types of resources. So there are hundreds, over 100 creative brains paying attention to solutions just on this call right now. This is an abundance. Things are scary right now, but resources are not scarce, but they do have to look different than before. So let's just take a moment. Go ahead and just stare beyond whatever screen you're actually looking at right now. And relax your jaw. Relax your shoulders, maybe roll your neck around a little bit. And inhale and exhale. We can do this. I loved seeing your heads roll around as I could see some of you guys on the call right now. So on that note of we can do this, the most important thing that you can do right now for yourself and for me and for the people around you is please stay home. I cannot stress enough how important it is for you to take this seriously. Please pay attention to the CDC and the Indiana State Department of Health recommendations for your safety and for your community safety. So quick gut check. What are you feeling today? You can feel free to type it in the chat box if you want to. But really, honestly, for me today, I'm feeling kind of frenzied. Yesterday, I was pretty overwhelmed And then I was feeling inspired. And then I also realized that I was kind of experiencing some stages of grief. And if we're going to be really, truly resilient and thrive on the other end of this is an important thing to recognize. We have lost something, and we're going to continue to lose some things. And when we are confined and restricted from having control over our lives, unless we literally, physically, or emotionally release energy, this stuff gets stored as trauma and may start to impact your body and other parts of your life. So please care for yourself by acknowledging and managing that grief in a healthy way. Things are not normal right now. In fact, there is not yet a new normal. And this waiting game is taking a toll. And yet, this is what we trained for. You are an artist. You are creative. You are an innovator, a storyteller, a prophet. You're a future bringer. You are your own best resource today. And I think probably from every day from now on, our job, and I take it personally, is to keep bringing you new metaphorical materials to create with, ideas and skills and tools to curate and create what that new reality is for you and for your community. You can do this. We can do this. I've asked my friend and fellow creative Sam Love from Gary, Indiana, to share a few more thoughts on this note.
Thank you, Anna. It was a really great setup there. Greetings from Gary. I'm Samuel Love. I'm a social practice artist, a community organizer, and a former classroom educator. I'm a recipient of the 2019 Individual Advancement Program Grant, which supported a year-long public poetry engagement in Carroll County, Indiana. And I am part of the 2019 Indiana On-Ramp cohort. This allowed me to do a deep documentation of cultural and creative practices here in Gary, resulting in the book, The Gary Anthology, which will be published this fall. I'm thankful to the IAC for their support of my work and for this opportunity to address fellow Hoosier artists in this very difficult time. I want to begin by talking about mutual aid efforts occurring in our state. I'm compiling the Indiana section for a broader Midwestern list, which you can find online at beltmag.com, beltmag.com. I want to invite each of you to contact me with any mutual aid efforts in Indiana. My email address is samuelalove219@gmail.com, and that will be included in a follow-up email. We can keep this list updated so that it serves simultaneously as a resource, a call to action, and a documentation of this moment, something that is a useful model in our time and for future emergencies. The term mutual aid might be unfamiliar to some of you, and some of you may be more familiar with it than others. It's a term we'll all come to hear more frequently in the unknowable near future. You probably already practice it in some way without even realizing it. Perhaps you watch the children of a friend who works odd hours, or perhaps you volunteer at a school or with your church. Mutual aid is the voluntary exchange of resources and services for the benefit of individuals and groups. If you've ever had doubts about your skills and the impact that you have as an artist, let's face it, we all have. Dispel that devil right now. We need you right now, where you are at, with what you have and who you have available to you. This is where mutual aid begins. So what can artists uniquely contribute to mutual aid efforts? I'm hesitant to speak in generalities about Hoosier artists. Every time I do something with the IAC, I'm reminded of the deep talent and diversity of practice we have in this state. That depth and diversity, of course, can be a strength. Every leading state and federal voice has now acknowledged that in the weeks and months ahead, we'll be presented with some of the most difficult conditions we've ever faced. Daily life will change. We will be confronted with strange objective realities on a scale not seen since the Great Depression or World War II. The political and economic crises will continue after the virus subsides. Mutual aid, especially if divorced from political action, does not have the capacity to meet the needs and the demands of the moment. But here's what's really bothering me, and this has bothered me for years. We seem to have an easier time imagining the complete and total destruction of life on Earth than we do envisioning a plan of action to organize a better world after a crisis. That lack of imagination is dangerous, especially in the face of powerful entities who are exploiting these crises to further their own miserable agendas. It's a good thing, then, that imagination is perhaps the most refined tool we artists have in our toolbox. We must help activate the radical imaginations of our communities and offer a glimpse of a better and more just world worth working towards. The paradigm shifts that we're experiencing requires us to activate our skills as storytellers, to retrain minds towards a way of thinking that knows that the old normal wasn't so normal, that the current normal is that right now nothing is normal, and that the next normal at this moment is unknowable. We may have to take on a split mind, acting both through a calm one that gets us through the simple everyday functions of life, and a more alert and anxious mind that acknowledges the troubles ahead, confronts the nihilism that has brought us to this point, and pressures those who would use their power to commit the same mistakes that have brought us to this frightening moment. Whether through dance, music, woodworking, traditional crafts, new technologies, fabric arts, or whatever the hell it is artists like me do, we're all telling stories in our work. And I think artists occupy a split mind in the course of our work, more often than most. The power of our art is that we can imagine many scenarios, including those of the worst case. This can provide us with an emotional familiarization to moments of crisis, which can help us manage our fears and make wiser judgments. We can offer comfort and support to so many in so many ways right now. Take the greatest care in what your work says. Act intentionally, be prepared, and be present. Perhaps the greatest need in this moment, our first act of story making, should be replacing a tired and false story. You can see an example of this in today's New York Times. The headline says, "Never thought I would need it. Americans put pride aside to seek aid." We can begin by articulating our needs, material, emotional, political, and creative, and building such creative platforms so that others may also honestly and with confidence declare their needs. Those with courage to tackle them will emerge as leaders, and I have no doubt we'll be among those leaders in Indiana. I want to thank you for this time. I'm going to turn it back to the staff of the IAC, who are going to get into some real meat and real day-to-day type stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate that charge. And now it's my pleasure to introduce two of my colleagues, Louis Riccio, Executive Director of the Indiana Arts Commission, and Maya Michelson, Deputy Director. Louis, you're on mute.
Here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Hello?
I can.
Okay. So thanks, Anna, and thanks, Sam, for some great inspiration and insight into the situation at hand. Yesterday, we held a webinar with a number of employment policy experts and lawyers as arts organizations focused on employment changes as a result of COVID-19. Some of the attendees on that webinar may be your employers or may have used you as a contractor. Some of you as individual artists, I know were on the webinar too. There was some information for you. But if you didn't watch the webinar, you can find a recording on the Indiana Arts Commission Facebook page or from the page Anna just showed you. We encourage you to stay up to date on the expectations and opportunities employers have at their fingertips to support you during this time. The good news is there are a lot of opportunities. Note that what we're about to share is just an overview of some major pieces of the Families First, a coronavirus Response Act, also known as FFCRA, and the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, known as CARES Act, as they stand today, April 1. Now that the legislation has been enacted, federal and state agencies now have the task of creating the policies and processes for delivering the support these laws offer. This means that more details are being determined even as we speak today. I liken this to that, they are building the airplane as they are flying it. So not everything is in place yet, but things will quickly become in place. In the next couple of weeks, the IC will be offering more in-depth discussions with experts on some of these topics. We may not be able to answer your specific questions about them today, but we'll tell you where to watch for more information. First, we want to let you know about funding from our federal partners. So first, I know a lot of you have heard about support from the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. And those funds that are in the relief bills will be going to arts and cultural organizations. This funding strategy is meant to stabilize the framework of the arts ecosystem in America. No details about the timing or amount of funds coming to Indiana have been released by the National Endowment for the Arts or the National Endowment for the Humanities at this time. Now our Deputy Director, Maya Michelson, will be sharing more information about the FFCRA and CARES Act and some of the great benefits that are a part of it.
Thanks, Louis. So this is going to get into the acronym heavy part of the presentation today, so bear with me. We'll talk about some of the features of some of the legislation that's passed. And again, there are a lot of follow-up resources on our webpage that Anna has already showed you. So want to talk first about some of the loan and tax credit opportunities that are in both the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which I lovingly call FFCRA, and the CARES Act. And those tax credit and loan opportunities incentivize organizations to provide paid leave, save jobs, or rehire employees if they must be laid off. So it's a really good idea to be aware of the ways your employer can be supporting you, perhaps by keeping an eye on some of the many webinars that are out there on that particular topic. FFCRA gives your employer tools to provide you with time off to recover from COVID-19 or to care for family members who are ill or to care for children at home due to school and daycare closures. You've probably already heard that the CARES Act directs the U.S. Treasury to provide direct payments to taxpayers from $1,200 per adult and $500 per child in a household, and that number decreases as income in the household increases. And from what we understand, those dollars should be coming through direct deposit, but more details coming on that shortly. The CARES Act also includes, and this is really important, really want you to listen carefully on that, and we'll be talking more, Elaine will talk a little bit more about that, and I anticipate we'll be doing another deep dive webinar on this, but it includes forgivable loans for self-employed individuals, such as artists and creative folks, and small business organizations, including arts organizations, through the Paycheck Protection Program, now lovingly known as PPP. Loans provided through PPP are forgivable for the amount used to cover payroll, rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. Those loans are administered through individual banks. It is a SBA program, but these loans will be administered through individual banks. All loan terms for the program are the same for everyone. So you should check with your current bank to see if they are participating in the Paycheck Protection Program, again, lovingly known as PPP. The application opens for small businesses, which would include arts organizations, this Friday, April 3rd, and for independent contractors, such as artists and other creative folk, on April 10th. And the application deadline is June 30th, 2020. We have posted a fact sheet on the PPP program in that resource area that Anna showed you on our ISD COVID-19 resource page. That comes directly from the Treasury Department and has additional details and requirements. There's actually even a sample PPP individual application for you to take a look at so that you can know some of the things that you will need to know before you dive into applying. There are also several other loans available to nonprofits through this relief package. The Small Business Administration, better known as SBA, is the best place to find resources about forgivable loans for nonprofits, including arts organizations, small businesses, or self-employed entrepreneurs, such as artists and other creative folks. In addition, the CARES Act provides expanded employment benefits for self-employed, gig workers, and freelancers. So much so that it's very likely that a creative who is self-employed, furloughed, laid off, or scheduled for 0 hours would qualify for some kind of employment compensation. Even if you have a full-time or part-time employment, you may be eligible to recoup employment loss from your creative gig as a result of COVID-19. The legislation also increases employment payments by an additional $600 per week for 4 months on top of what state unemployment programs pay. And qualifying individuals can receive unemployment benefits for 39 weeks. And again, as Lewis mentioned earlier, these deadlines are shifting and these week requirements currently are shifting, and it could be very well that this gets extended. So this is, again, current as of today. It could very well be expanded in the near future. The Indiana State Department of Workforce Development recommends you apply now. Be honest about your situation and allow their staff the opportunity to determine what you're eligible to receive. There is an awesome flow chart on social media that's floating around, thank you, Anna, that talks about government support for creative professionals and different outlets and ways to access that. The bottom line we need you to remember now is that there are opportunities for support. The Indiana Department for Workforce Development will always have the most up-to-date information about unemployment benefits, and you can apply for unemployment today at unemployment.in.gov. Now, what I would say as a caveat before I toss it back to Lewis is that Indiana is one of the states that in the past has not provided unemployment benefits for independent contractors and gig workers. So they are building that system up now. So there's a bit of a learning curve there that we anticipate that we will need to be working with them on. So hang tight. We'll get there. So, but feel free to go ahead and visit the website. The application obviously will be done online, and we anticipate this will be another area that we'll be doing a deeper dive webinar in the future. So now I'm going to send it back to you, Lewis. Lewis, you're on mute.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
So thanks, Maya. There are several organizations that unpack all of these changes at much greater detail than we're able to share with you today. If you're itching to dive in deeper, check out the National Council for Nonprofits or Americans for the Arts, or our own Indiana Arts Commission webinar recordings. You can find more information about each of these opportunities at our website, www.n.gov/arts. Our staff is on alert for more details about federal and state programs that can benefit your creative business and life. And you can be sure that we'll share out what we know as soon as it becomes clear. I think I'm turning it over back to Sam at this point.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lewis and Maya, for that information. And I see the beginnings of messages that people are leaving about particular situations and filing for unemployment. So I just want to say, first of all, it's something we've all talked about, that like the thought of filing unemployment has sent me through first, second, third, and probably fourth level guessing of myself. I've worked since I was 16. Like a lot of people on here, I now am completely freelance. And I've really been grappling with the idea of, well, can I even? Is it going to be too complicated? Am I going to get frustrated? And I love your metaphor about building the airplane while it's in the air. But I also think, well, you know, is there a limited amount out there? And am I going to take something that somebody else needs more than I do. And I got to catch myself with that. And I think we all need to get rid of that survival of the fittest type of thinking and move more towards a symbiotic and communal type of thinking where we can solve these problems together. It sounds like one thing we need to do is get in touch with our state and national representatives. There is a learning curve, exactly. And it sounds like we may need to inform them of our stories about difficulties we may be having with the forms or understanding these processes. And it sounds like we need to keep talking with each other. And I want to charge the IAC with keeping us organized and having these conversations. And I want to thank you for what you're doing already. So yeah, I'm going to do something I've never done that makes me a bit nervous is I'm going to go look at filing for unemployment, which is almost worse than the time I had to move back home with my parents at age 32, but that's a different story. I get the pleasure of introducing you to Elaine Grogan Latrobe. Elaine is a certified financial therapist, CPA, and a founder of Minerva Financial Arts. She led us through the on-ramp process, and I think she has an amazing ability to captivate the attention of an audience and explain things in a way that they can become actionable. So she's been keeping up with the finance world's response to the COVID-19 crisis and has been doing these regular financial check-ins. Absolutely wonderful person. So with that, Elaine, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Sam. I appreciate that. And thanks for your kind words and all the great work you make. And huge thanks to the Indiana Arts Commission for continuing to have these conversations. They are insanely important. And the support we provide to each other, I think, is as important as the support we're getting from all sorts of other sources as well. I began by reminding everyone that all the systems are struggling a little bit right now. That includes the unemployment application system, which is being updated in real time to account for the new rules for freelancers and individual artists and gig economy workers. And it also means platforms like Zoom are being overloaded with lots and lots of use. So thanks for persevering with us as we go through this. So what should you be doing right now? I like the idea of getting a handle around your own numbers. This is a quickie spreadsheet you can put together yourself that basically gives you a snapshot of all of the balances in your savings account and your checking account right now, the balances you have in any sort of debt you might have, whether that is a mortgage or student loans or a car loan or any sort of other loans you might have. Keep an eye on that. And then as you're thinking about money coming in and money going out over the next month, jot down some ideas of what you might be expecting, because doing the math and paying attention to the numbers as we're going through this is going to be really important. And it's important for individuals, for arts organizations, for gallery owners, for families, for individual artists, for all of those individuals. So let's take a second and dive a little bit deeper into this expense section. One thing you can and probably are already thinking about doing is figuring out ways to minimize your expenses as much as possible. And luckily, creative people are really good at figuring this out. Suspend any payments you can so that you are not paying things right now that are unnecessary. And ask for flexibility. It is okay to ask for flexibility from your landlord, from your utility companies, from your loan servicers, for anyone else you pay money to on a regular basis. It is okay to ask for flexibility. This looks like a lot of different things. I know some individual artists that might rent studio space could think about going together and approaching the landlord and saying, we're not in a position to pay rent for the next 2 months. What sort of options are there? I've heard anecdotally about different arrangements that various individuals have struck with their landlords. One arrangement is where the lease term is extended by 2 months and a 2-month payment for rent is paused over the next 2 months. That feels like a really, really good option if your landlord is open to that. Another model I've heard about anecdotally is where people pause their rent payments for 1 or 2 months and then take the amount that then they owe to the landlord and spread it over the rest of their remaining months. So maybe the monthly amount will go up a little bit after things return to normal. So you're not paying back rent in big chunks, you're paying it in an amount that's spread over time. That could be a little bit more reasonable as you think about what your cash flow is going to look like as you're coming out of this. Some landlords are just waiving rent requirements completely. Those are sort of the gold standard of landlords, and not everyone is in that position. But because many banks and credit unions are providing flexibility with mortgage payments, very often the landlords can then turn around and offer some flexibility to their tenants. So keep those conversations open. It's okay to ask for those types of arrangements. And if you don't know what a good arrangement might look like, maybe you simply approach the landlord and say, can we work something out? There's not really a playbook for this. This is a new thing that no one has really dealt with before. So keeping those conversations open and having some examples of maybe what other people are doing, which is why these types of conversations are so important, can be a good way for you to approach your landlord. The same is also true for utility companies, for your phone companies, for your internet service providers, right? Everyone is sort of understanding that there are some serious economic challenges right now. So opening up conversations about some flexibility when it comes to payment is an okay thing to do right now. When it comes to your loan payments, definitely be in touch with your lenders. If you have student loans, and if those are federal student loans, your repayments have been paused until September, which is wonderful, wonderful news. If you have private student loans, or if you have any other kind of loans that you are making regular payments on, it's okay to reach out to that loan service provider and see if there is any flexibility or what some flexibility might look like. And as you are having all of these conversations, go ahead and document what is being said, who you're talking to, when you're having these conversations, and go ahead and confirm things in writing if you can, or at least keep pretty good notes just to make sure that there's no confusion about what was agreed to later on. And since you're not going to be able to apply for unemployment until some of the system issues get worked out, these are some things you can do while you're checking those frequently asked questions on the unemployment portal, while you're waiting for that stimulus check to come in, right? These are some things you can do now that are under your control. I would really encourage you to reach out to your bank or credit union. As Maya mentioned, they are facilitating many of these loan programs, especially the PPP. They might not have all of the answers to your questions right now because they are learning about what these programs entail in real time, just like we are. But reach out to them, engage with them as a human to the extent possible, and they will help guide you through this and answer your questions. I saw a question in the chat earlier about someone who had approached a bank or a credit union that said they were not participating and no one in the area was participating. I'd encourage you to maybe follow up and just say, you know, tell me more about what that means, because it is possible they are not, but as I think the person mentioned in the chat, the bank indicated they were going to be prioritizing their own customers, and it sounds like this person might be one of those customers. So follow up and say, you know, I understand you're not participating. What could we be doing instead? And again, they might not have the answers, but they might have some direction or be able to support in some way. The other conversations you can be having right now are with trade groups, other associations you're already a part of, civic associations, your neighborhood associations, or your city associations. No one might not have a whole lot of answers right now, but many people are asking some of the same questions. And these are great groups to talk to when it comes to talking about different ideas for conversations you can have with landlords or with utility companies or other suppliers. Really, we are all in this together, and it is okay to go ahead and have these conversations and supporting each other. So that's it on the expense side. Focus on minimizing your expenses to the extent possible and asking for flexibility and documenting those conversations. When it comes to the income side, many of you have already found creative ways to adapt to this new environment. We've seen lots of great examples of what people are doing creatively in Indiana to continue to make work. Many of you shared anecdotes and ideas that you've been doing at the beginning of this conversation. And we've also seen other examples of individuals who have been posting their work online, and they haven't seen sales be where they want them to be, but they're still moving forward, which is really wonderful. And because you've done so much work around community engagement and working with those you serve, it's an okay time to reach out for them to see if someone needs a commission or a poem or a small scene written for children to perform while they are not in school all day, or other ways of engaging with those you serve and opening up a dialogue about how you can provide work for them and what that might look like. The other piece of the income side that I think it's important to talk about is this emergency support that is coming and available. And here's a quick breakdown of the CARES Act and the money and where it's going. This $2 trillion support package is going to a lot of different areas. And what I want to draw your attention to is that these green sections are basically being administered at the federal and state level, and all of these sections are available for individuals, including individual artists and small businesses. And of course, individual artists, arts organizations, galleries, individuals all count as small businesses. There's additional support coming out through the NEA. That's part of that public service piece. And there's additional support going to state and local agencies, right? And that's all coming. But there is support that's probably going to be available sooner, and that's through these individual and small business options. As Maya mentioned, the stimulus money should, and I'm saying should very carefully, but it should be direct deposited into your account in the next couple of weeks or so. This is being administered through the IRS, and so they're using the same account information that you would have submitted to get your refund from your tax filing in 2018 or 2019. I imagine there will be hiccups, so pay attention, keep an eye on those accounts and get an understanding of what you might be eligible for. It should be $1,200 per person and $500 per child in a household, and that amount phases out as your adjusted gross income goes up. If you want to know what these numbers are, I have some lines from your 1040 referenced here on the slide. So just get a sense, maybe get that 2018 and 2019 tax return handy while you're digging through some of those other papers, just to make sure you've got all the information you need and you're ready to go. If you have not filed taxes for 2018 or 2019, I would highly suggest that you go ahead and do that. In fact, that's the IRS's advice posted on their website right now. Because this stimulus money is being administered through the tax system, it's a good idea to make sure you have a tax return on file so that you can be part of this initial distribution. We know unemployment does now apply to contract and gig workers and individual artists. I would encourage you to keep visiting the Indiana's Department of Workforce Development site. There really are great frequently asked questions there that are being updated very regularly. And I encourage you to just be patient. I know it's frustrating when you go through the process and can't complete it, but be patient because everyone's working through this slowly. The resource we already drew your attention to from the Dramatists Guild is fantastic. So go ahead and get a copy of that via social media or any of these materials and pay attention to that. Another question that keeps coming up, especially when it comes to unemployment, is how individual artists, art gallery owners, other individuals in the creative sector can go ahead and estimate their lost income. And that is a real challenge. If you get through the unemployment process in Indiana, they're going to ask you what your wages were for the past 4 quarters out of the past 5. So basically they're looking at a year in the past of what your wages were. One good way of estimating this and then documenting it through the system could be with your tax return. return. Generally, that seems to be a good way that many states are thinking about gathering this information. But it's also possible that you have a situation where you have information that is better or different. That's probably going to be okay as well, but you're going to have to document your lost income in some sort of way. So definitely pay attention to that. I see a question in the chat about filing taxes. If you filed taxes by snail mail, is there a way where you can go and get direct deposit information? I would say wait and let's see. Depending on how you completed the tax return, you may have already provided direct deposit information. So that's possible. If you got a refund, the IRS will do the same thing that or follow those same instructions that you provided on your tax return. If you didn't complete that section, my guess is you will probably get a letter from the IRS requesting your information. And so let's wait for some additional guidance. And I'm sorry, I don't have an official answer on that yet. And then a clarification, when looking at your wages for unemployment purposes, we're looking at 4 quarters, not including the current quarter, right? So we're looking backwards in time for approximately a year. And another question for clarification here, when I say wages, does that include write-offs for travel, or is that made without write-offs? I believe we are looking at the top line number. So gross wages or gross earnings, not counting your write-offs. Again, we're waiting for additional clarification on this because this is still a very new thing, but I would move forward at this point with the assumption that it's going to be gross wages. And then stay tuned and pay attention to the additional webinars offered on unemployment that will be coming from Indiana and from the Indiana Arts Commission. Another question in the chat is about, can you apply for unemployment if you receive Social Security and you are over 65 years old? What you would want to do is pay attention to the income thresholds that apply to you for your Social Security. So you would just want to make sure that any benefits you do receive, whether it's through small business support or emergency grant support or unemployment support, fall below the threshold of what you are allowed to earn without jeopardizing your Social Security. I mentioned the student loan payments are paused. Definitely go onto your portal and check the payment due online information. It should probably say 0 for you, meaning there's no amount due for federal loans. If I were you, I would take a screen grab of that or print that out just so you have the information ready. And this should be extended through September 30th. It is only automatic for federal loans. So reach out to your private loan service providers and ask for information there as well. We know the Small Business Administration is offering loans to small businesses, counting individual artists and any other small business individuals. These loans are special because the interest rate is particularly low and you do not have to make repayments on these loans for 11 months, right? So that's good. In theory, that should give us some time to recover a bit economically before you have to think about making loan repayments. And as you're thinking about long-term what your business looks like, what we would want to do is just model in those repayments to make sure that's sustainable for you and not causing additional extra stress. But this amount can be very helpful as you are paying for more supplies or paying for your studio rent or studio utilities or other payments that may have less flexibility than others. I also want to draw your attention that the SBA is also extending grants as well as loans. And these are fantastic because grants do not have to be repaid. Loans generally do have to be repaid unless they are forgivable loans. The question came up in the chat earlier, what is a forgivable loan? A forgivable loan is one that is forgiven, meaning you do not have to repay it. And that's if you are putting the loan toward particular expenses expenses that are deemed forgivable right now. And again, there are a lot of different acronyms and programs at play, each with different requirements. But what you need to know is loans are available. Some emergency grants from the SBA are available. And this seems to be the question that was just added to the chat. Some small business loans that turn into grants. Yes, my understanding is that as you go through this application process, immediately afterwards, you will be able to apply for an emergency grant as well, up to $10,000. So again, go through the SBA process, connect with your local resources, and be patient as everyone sort of figures out all of these details in real time. There are also other emergency grant support available. I'd encourage you to cultivate your network and identify all the other choices that might be available for you. And then I'd bring you back to sort of our global picture of what should you be doing, taking deep breaths, watching the math, paying attention to the balances in your accounts, checking in with these things regularly, and knowing that this will not last forever. And at some point, although we're not sure when, we are going to come out of this. And at that point, we'll do some more math and some more modeling around what income looks like going forward, what your expenses might look like going forward, and how extending this can be part of debt repayments on an ongoing basis. You should not be panicking. I know that's hard to do because there's a lot going on right now, but try not to panic and try to be patient. Also, don't avoid hard conversations. Sam mentioned this earlier with struggling or thinking through what it means to apply for unemployment, or what it means to ask for flexibility from a landlord, or what it means to approach your core community of supporters for support right now. Don't avoid these hard conversations, right? It's important to go ahead and have them because you might be pleasantly surprised at the outcome. Also, don't stress about making work. I saw in the chat early on that some people are feeling very inspired about the work they're making right now. And I think that's amazing. A number of people are also not really making work or not feeling particularly motivated to make work. That's okay. You can pay attention to your own rhythm and your own approach, and whatever works for you can work. We know things are crazy in the investment world right now, so don't do anything rash, right? Take your time. Remember that investing is a long-term game, right? And before you take any major moves with your investments, maybe talk to some financial professionals that you trust who can give you some really good, solid advice. And then don't pretend that nothing's going on. Go ahead and embrace this and confront it and continue the conversations and continue visiting the websites and continue doing what you need to do for yourself, caring for yourself, and for others as well, because this is as stressful for the state administrators and the IRS agents who are trying to process these stimulus payments and everyone else who is affected by this. So don't forget to care for yourself and others. Here's a quick recap of some of the information. I'd encourage you to follow up with questions if you have them. And with that, I'm going to turn this back over to the IAC team.
Fabulous. Thank you, Elaine. All right, I'm going to take the share back from you. I just wanted to point out there are lots of questions in the chat about specific eligibility and limits for unemployment. I wanted to first take you back to this webpage where you can find here, we will be posting a recording of this and the slides that we've used today, but one of the important links in here takes you to the Indiana Department of Workforce Development. And of course, just like a lot of you are finding, they are slammed right now, and they're still trying to figure some things out. So if you take nothing else away from this right now, know that you are looking in the right place, and if you haven't heard back from them yet, you will. They're working on it, okay? And one other piece of advice that I've heard a lot from things listening to the Department of Workforce Development is just take a look at the claimant handbook first. They have had probably exactly the same questions coming at them that you're asking a million times over, even before this crisis. And so they may be answered in this claimant handbook. So check that out there. The other thing, I've seen a lot of questions in the chat box about the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, and there are a couple of links in here about more information. This is a really helpful fact sheet that comes straight from the Department of Treasury that kind of outlines a lot of the the details about it. So take a look at this first, because a lot of the questions in here are specific, I know, to your situation. But one of the questions that came through was about where can I go to look for a different financial institution if mine is not participating in that program. And I was just going to scroll through here for a second, but the types of financial institutions that are participating have a special code. I guess you should read through here. A special code is like a SBA 7A institution and some other federally certified institutions. And Maya, do you have thoughts on that? I saw you.
Yeah, Anna, you've got it right centered in the screen right now. You can actually visit sba.gov. That'll give you a list of all the SBA lenders. And I anticipate there will be lots of lenders jumping into this program who aren't currently a lender through that. So if your current lender is not, they may very quickly be jumping on board with this. Otherwise, there's a list here for you to start to look at who else in your area is a certified lender through the SBA for this program. So.
Thank you. There have been a couple other questions that I think, Elaine, I'd like for you to take a stab at. In general, can you give us a sense of what might disqualify or reduce the amount of unemployment benefits that we can receive? For example, if we're continuing to create work, or if we have another full-time or part-time job, or if other pension or things like that are coming in, different sources of income.
Yes, that's a great question. The math behind it will be determined by the unemployment office in Indiana, but maintaining a full-time job would reduce the benefits you are eligible for, right? Maybe not to zero. The math sort of needs to be worked out in detail, but something like that could reduce the benefits you are eligible for. If you are continuing to make work, but not be able to sell it, you should still be able to receive some benefits, right? So this is where that documentation of what that previous income was will become really important. So as Maya said, your best bet is to provide honest and truthful information as you're going through the process and the system so that the experts can work through the math. I have not seen a clear calculator yet that helps you figure out exactly what that is, but I would encourage you to go ahead and answer honestly, provide all the documentation you can, and then know that your benefits will be determined based on other income you have available and based on historic earnings, probably.
Thank you. Again, lots of things for you to sort out with what is going on in your situation specifically, and understand that it's frustrating to still continue to have these questions. So you now have a lot of resources at your fingertips to go and do a little bit more digging yourself. One question that did come through is about, I applied for self-employment, unemployment benefits, but I feel like I made a mistake or I need to go back and change something. How do I do that? And I would recommend that you reach out to Department of Workforce Development. That even if you get a wait list or get into a chat that lasts forever, it's still worth they're the experts in this. And don't forget to have a little bit of patience with yourself and feeling like I should be doing something right now. It's okay to take a little bit of rest and be patient with each other. And when, to Sam's point, you need something, please ask. Please ask people who are around you and continue to keep this conversation going with us. We still want to hear from you. So don't forget to take that open line survey on our home page and keep us updated. So like we mentioned before, have some deep dive webinars coming up next week talking about intellectual property. And then we will, once more details come clear, hopefully in the next week or two from the Indiana DWD, be diving into some more workforce development unemployment details. And I encourage you to take a look at Elaine's Coping with COVID financial support group every Monday, 3 to 4. Elaine, anything you want to say about how to register for that?
Yeah, there is a registration link on my website, and I'm happy to provide it to you, Anna, if you'd like to share it with the attendees later.
Sure will. Okay. Please feel free to reach out to us. Again, these slides are going to be available on that place I showed you on the webpage. We'll stick around for a few more moments. If there are questions that we feel like we can answer, we'll do our best. And last but not least, please stay home. There are lots of great Netflix things to binge. I'm asking you to do this for me. Thank you.
Hey, it's Marianne. I just want to jump in and answer. Somebody posted a question saying that it seemed like many emergency funds were only available to people living near cities. And what about rural artists? All of these programs are accessible to anyone, depending on where you live. I mean, not depending on where you live. So unemployment is available statewide. CARES Act provisions related to the PPP payroll projection program is also available statewide. So those are not city-based programs. Those are national programs being administered by the state. So if you're in rural areas, these programs apply to you just equally as they would apply to someone who's in a larger community. So don't think that these are just for people who are in urban areas. There are some programs that community foundations and larger communities are offering, but those are very community specific. But most of what we've been talking about today is very much available, and I hope will be accessed by a lot of folks in rural communities. So more to come on that.
Thank you, Maya. Sam, any last words? Final words?
Well, thank you for this opportunity. You know, I think I'll just stress what everybody else has pointed out, that we need to be patient and things are changing and this is new ground. So just remember that your power and what you control is how you respond to situations. You know, we don't control time, we control biology, but we do control how we respond to them. So just, I wish the best to everybody out there.
Thank you. Have a great evening, everyone.